Have you ever wondered what makes money, well, money? Why is this piece of paper or that number on your screen worth anything at all? For most of human history, the answer was simple and shiny: gold. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible story of the gold standard, the era when money was literally made of gold, and what happened when that all changed. Imagine walking into a bank, handing over a paper banknote, and walking out with a solid gold coin. Sounds like something out of a pirate movie, right? But for centuries, this was reality. This system was called the gold standard. In simple terms, it meant that a country's currency had a value directly linked to gold. The government promised that you could, at any time, exchange your paper money for a specific amount of real, physical gold. So, where did this golden idea come from? Well, humans have been obsessed with gold for millennia. Egyptians, Romans, you name it. They all valued its rarity, its beauty, and the fact that it doesn't rust or corrode. It was the perfect material for currency. While early coins were made from various metals, it was Britain that really kicked off the formal gold standard in the early 18th century, thanks to a guy you might have heard of, Sir Isaac Newton. Yes, the apple and gravity guy. As master of the Royal Mint, he set a fixed price for gold in terms of British pounds, effectively putting Britain on a gold standard. By the late 19th century, this system went global. It was the golden age of the gold standard. Major countries like Germany, France, and the United States all hopped on board. This created a remarkably stable international financial system. Think about it. If the US dollar was worth a certain amount of gold, and the British pound was worth a certain amount of gold, then you automatically knew the exchange rate between the dollar and the pound. It made international trade and investment much simpler and more predictable. It was like a global financial anchor, keeping everything in place. Prices were stable and inflation was almost non-existent. It was a period of immense economic growth and globalization, often called the Belle Époque or Gilded Age. But this golden anchor also had a heavy chain attached. A country's money supply was limited by the amount of gold it had in its vaults. If you wanted to print more money, you had to find more gold first. This was a huge problem during times of crisis. When World War I broke out in 1914, everything changed. Wars are incredibly expensive. Governments needed to print massive amounts of money to pay for soldiers, weapons, and supplies. But they couldn't do that while tied to the gold standard. They just didn't have enough gold. So one by one, countries suspended the gold standard. They broke the promise to exchange currency for gold, freeing themselves to print the money they needed to fund the war effort. It was a necessary evil, but it opened Pandora's box. After the war, everyone tried to put the genie back in the bottle. Countries attempted to return to the gold standard in the 1920s, hoping to restore the stability they once had. But the world had changed. The US and France now held most of the world's gold. Other countries, like Britain, struggled. They tried to set their currencies back to their pre-war gold values, but their economies were much weaker. This made their goods super expensive and uncompetitive on the world market, leading to economic pain and unemployment. Then came the knockout blow, the Great Depression of the 1930s. As economies crumbled, people panicked. They rushed to the banks to do exactly what the gold standard promised: exchange their paper money for gold. They trusted the solid metal more than they trusted the shaky banks or governments. This created massive bank runs and drained countries of their precious gold reserves. Governments faced a terrible choice: either raise interest rates to convince people to hold on to their currency, which would worsen the economic depression, or abandon gold altogether. One by one, they chose to abandon gold. Britain left in 1931. The United States, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, followed suit in 1933. FDR even made it illegal for private citizens to hoard gold, forcing them to sell it to the government. By breaking the link to gold, governments were finally free to use monetary policy to fight the depression. They could increase the money supply, lower interest rates, and try to stimulate economic activity. For many economists, this was the beginning of the end of the Great Depression. But the story of gold wasn't quite over. After World War II, the Trace pas mot II, The world's leaders met at Bretton Woods to design a new system. They created a sort of gold-light standard. The US dollar was still convertible to gold, but only for foreign central banks, not for individuals. All other currencies were then pegged to the US dollar. For a while this system worked, fueling the post-war economic boom. The dollar was as good as gold, but the same old problems resurfaced. The US was spending huge amounts of money, especially on the Vietnam War and social programs. It was printing more dollars than it had gold to back them up. Other countries, particularly France, noticed this. They started getting nervous and began exchanging their dollars for US gold, as was their right. America's gold reserves started to shrink, fast. The breaking point came on August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon went on television and announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. This event, known as the Nixon shock, officially and permanently severed the link between money and gold. The gold standard was dead. Since then, we've lived in a world of fiat currency. The word fiat is Latin for "let it be done." Our money has value simply because the government declares that it does, and because we all collectively agree to accept it as a medium of exchange. This gives central banks like the Federal Reserve incredible flexibility to manage the economy. But it also carries the risk of inflation if they print too much money. So the rise and fall of the gold standard is more than just a history lesson. It's a fascinating story about trust, power, and the very nature of money. It shows us the trade-offs between stability and flexibility that governments still grapple with today. While gold no longer backs our currency, its legacy endures as a symbol of ultimate value and a safe haven in times of uncertainty. What do you think? Should we ever go back to a gold standard? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into how our world works. See you in the next video.